And you're not going to want to miss the latest edition of the Just Right podcast. We just put it in the can. Listen, we interviewed Thanh Boyer, author of The Ground Kisser. One of the amazing stories she has, escaping communist Vietnam as a child, on a refugee boat filled with hundreds of people, intercepted by pirates, left adrift in the South China Sea, became a refugee, eventually found her way to the United States. She has a mission right now, basically to tell the world why America is the greatest place on the face of the earth, and two, to make sure Vietnam veterans know that they are loved and appreciated. Thanh Boyer, you are not going to want to miss this conversation. Just Right podcast coming up. Yeah, let's do a show.
1, 2, 3, hey!
Well, Thanh Boyer, welcome to the Right Side Media Studio.
Thank you.
We're glad
Thank
to have
for
you.
having me.
Look, I'm going to do just a brief introduction, sort of tell the world who's sitting here at the table with me. But you got an amazing story. An amazing story. You grew up in a time of war in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
You became a refugee at one point, robbed by pirates as you were, leaving the country.
Right.
You were left adrift at some point, I understand. You wound up in Indonesia. You finally came to America. You found your husband. You found the Lord. You raised a family. And I think one of the things that I've noticed is you have a love for this country, which we'll talk about more with your book in a minute. But for right now, welcome to the Just Right podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Well, listen, I said it a moment ago. So you grew up in a time of war.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us where you're from and how that came about.
Yeah. I was 8 years old when the war ended. Came from in Vietnam. I came from the Mekong Delta of Vietnam. We lived right by the Mekong River. Mekong River is a pretty big river. I think it's even bigger than the Mississippi River here. But we live right on the border between Cambodia and Vietnam. It's about 6 miles from my house, the border is. And I was 8 years old when the war ended. And because I live on the border of Cambodia and Vietnam, I also experienced the war between Cambodia and Vietnam after the fall of Saigon in 1975.
Yeah, that was a turbulent time. I mean, you're talking about the time of not just the United States presence in Vietnam
Mm-hmm.
and what the fall of Saigon was 1975.
75.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think the U.S. troop pulled out in 1973.
Yeah. And then Saigon fell in 75. Is that right?
Right.
And the communist takeover of the country at that point.
Exactly.
But then the Khmer Rouge were north in Cambodia, and the killing fields started in like
Yes.
78, 79 time frame.
Yes. About, 76 when it kind of started, and then it just escalated between 78 and 79.
Now you lived in the Mekong Delta area, so were you in an urban environment or were you in like a rural environment?
I was in an urban environment. It's a little town called Tăng Châu, Tanchau, and is in the An Giang province. It's, the roads in Vietnam is really not smooth like here. So it takes about 6 hours from Saigon. So it's a little bit southwest of Saigon.
Listen, I've had some time overseas myself in different parts of the world, and I've said many times people don't realize here in America that the dirtiest alleyway is sometimes better than the best road in foreign countries.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you remember war when you were a kid?
Gosh, yes. I remember a lot. And, when the thought of putting my story together and putting it in a book, I realized that I had forgotten a lot. And once I enlisted Lisa Smith to help me with the book, she asked some questions, and it just kind of, helped me to go back to the past. So yeah, I remember mostly where I am. The Vietnam War didn't affect me as much, but the war between Cambodia and Vietnam affected me a whole lot more because being near the border town, living by the Mekong River, we saw the atrocities of Pol Pot's, the killing fields, basically, coming down that river every single day.
I saw a speech you gave getting ready for today, and you talked about the fact that your mother would say, "Don't go to the river."
Yeah. Yeah.
And you did anyway.
Yes.
Like most kids would do. Mom says, "Don't do it."
Exactly.
You did it, but what did you see? What happened when you went down there?
Well, Yeah, my parents tried to shield us. We came from a very wealthy family. So my parents tried to shield us from a lot of things. And there are times where the atrocity of Pol Pot's body parts coming down that Mekong River. And I'm not talking about one or two bodies. I'm talking about a wave of hundreds and thousands of bodies.
And you saw this as a kid.
I went. My mom and dad was like, "Don't go to the river. Don't go look out to the river." And at the kids, of course, me and also dragging some of my siblings and cousins and go look at it. And I remember seeing bloated bodies, headless, heads and hands and limbs, and just coming down, floating down the river, and watching some of my relatives taking long sticks and push the body parts back into the channel so that it would, keep on floating down that main channel. And I remember the smell of it. It's just horrific.
There are, I've heard it said sometimes that memories are sometimes keyed more by smell than they are by visual.
Yeah.
Smells come back to you. They bring things back.
Absolutely. Believe it or not, the blooms of the pear trees in spring bring that memories back.
Really?
There's a smell of it that it's remind me of the bodies that I smell as 8, 9 years old. Wow. And I remember the other 2 weeks ago when I was given talk to a high school kids, and another memory came back of that time. I remember when the water received from the Mekong River sometimes, my family would let me play, me and my siblings and cousin. I have 1,000 cousins in Vietnam. I mean, we're all related somehow. So we would play by the river, out there with the water about waist deep. And us playing in that river somehow, I remember seeing a hand.
Oh, wow.
And we were all just screaming to get out of the water. And when you start seeing one or two body parts, there's more coming. So, I mean, within hours, you start seeing more bodies coming in. That's the Cambodian, that's Pol Pot's. Their communism, I think, is more evil than even Vietnam, because if you wear glasses, they will kill you. That's represent intellectual. They're not going to have it. If you can read a book, they will kill you.
And I remember hearing too that one of the things that was so amazing was how they would have children turn against parents, and parents even turn against children.
Yes.
And it was self-preservation meant turning someone in, and that was how you protected yourself. And
yes.
What a horrible life.
And I mean, to today, there are homes in my hometown where blood stains on the wall still. There's still blood stains on the wall because where the Khmer would come in at night, and they would try to extract information from the locals, and they would take babies from mother's arms and take the baby and smash the baby against the wall, and there's still blood stains on those walls to today.
Well, I don't think Americans sometimes realize the blessing of living in a country where war does not touch the ground we walk on.
Right. Yeah.
Having said that, so you lived through some amazing events in your home country, your original your country of your origin.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like when the communists took over the country? I mean, you went from, and you said your family was fairly wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
What did your family do, by the way? How did
yeah. So my great-grandparents, my paternal great-grandparents, escaped the communist part of China.
Okay.
So he and my great-grandmother escaped communist part of China and settled in the Mekong Delta. He was a Eastern medicine man, so that was his profession. So they started a family there. Because we live by the Mekong River, which the Mekong River is It's a gateway to all the commodities, coming down that river from Cambodia and other part of the
It's a trade route.
Trade route. So my paternal grandfather started buying commodities that came down that river, buy and sell, and he started that business. And he has 10 kids. My father is the third child.
Okay.
And everybody worked in my grandfather's business. And so he started that business. And I mean, we dealt with everything. We bought silk coming down that river. We had a bakery at one point. We had a Fanta bottling company, believe it or not.
Really?
In Vietnam, in South Vietnam at one point. So we were one of the richest family in our province.
So what happened when the communists came? Because
when the
wealth is not usually allowed in the communist countries.
Not at all. They came in and they basically overnight, with a stroke of a pen, they nationalized all of our businesses and take away and close our bank account, froze our bank account, start take over some of our homes and our land. And they were allow my family to have only the bakery. And even with that, they tell us what to produce, how to produce it, and even at what price. So we went from having one of the richest family in the province to being just like everybody. I mean, that's what communism and socialism is, right?
Yeah.
They basically, their things is take from the rich to help the poor. Sounds great. Sounds really, who does not want everybody to be equal, but it doesn't work that way. All I did was take away the incentive of people really working, want to do better for themselves, and the rich become poorer and the poor stay in poverty.
Yeah, communism crushes the spirit, doesn't it?
It is. And communism it's a religion. It is. It's a religion.
Was it so when they took over everything, when the communists took over the country, and the South Vietnamese government fell, did they literally come in, aside from the stroke of the pen and the things that they took? Did they come in and did they micromanage your life? I mean, did they actually walk into the house and tell you, here's how things are going to be?
Yeah, we had a communist family came in and lived with us.
Live with you?
Just to watch us.
They put watchers in your house?
Yes. To make sure we didn't hide anything from them, because we were rich. And basically we went from, okay, I'll give you an example. Before, when you have aches and pain, you can go to the market and get a bottle of aspirin.
Right.
When the communists took over, commodities and everything was so scarce that you can only buy one aspirin. And also because that's all people could also afford.
Wow.
A pregnant mom can only buy one multivitamin. You can't just go buy enough rice and soy sauce and things like that for your family, or fabrics and threads to make clothes. You have to stand in line to buy, those things.
Everything rationed, everything parceled
Everything rationed, yes. And you can stand in line for hours sometimes, and there's nothing. And by the time they get to you, there's nothing left. And you have to come back the next day to get back in line.
Meanwhile, the communist leaders got fat, I'm sure.
They got fat, yes.
Yeah,
they
sure.
took over all the people homes and moved in. And, yeah, even today, all the millionaires in Vietnam, you betcha, they have a communist tie to them.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so this is a turbulent time. How long after the fall of Saigon did you remain in the country? You personally remain in the country?
4 years.
So 4 years, so
And I think
1979-ish.
1979, 2 weeks after my birthday, which is in May, it's when my sister and I escaped Vietnam.
Okay, well, tell me about that, because I know in one of the speeches of yours that I reviewed, it wasn't your whole family that came out.
Right.
It was just a few, and your parents had to make a choice, basically.
Yes.
So what was that family discussion like to decide who leaves and who stays?
Gosh, I remember that night very clearly. I had several aunts and uncles. They were able to afford to pay passages. And when I say pay pay passages to leave Vietnam meant that you're paying the official to look this way so you can escape
So
this
this is
way.
a bribe.
It's a bribe. So if you get caught, they can throw you in jail. So basically, you bribe the government to leave. So I had a few aunts and uncles that had signed up to leave Vietnam on this riverboat, and they're going to Australia because they felt Australia is the safest place to be. And also, we have a few cousins that already left Vietnam before the fall of Saigon, and they settled in Australia.
Okay.
So overnight, one of my aunt came home and told my dad that there may be some empty spots on this refugee boat, and that we should take the empty spots. And there's 8 of us in the family, my parents and 6 kids, me being the oldest.
Okay. How old were you at the time?
I was 12.
Wow. Okay.
And basically, my parents have only a few hours to decide this. And my parents, of course, at this time in 1979, everybody was struggling. We don't have a whole lot of money. And I know it was a lot of sacrifice for my parents to even, bribe someone to the official for me and my sister to leave. And so, there were only enough money for just 2 passages. And so they picked me, being the oldest. I was 12. And my next sister, she's a little bit over 10 years old, to leave with my aunt and uncle. And my parent has to make the decision overnight. I mean, I just can't imagine.
No.
The pain and the...
Do you remember them telling you?
I remember, yeah. And I remember my parents said to trust them, And I think, being the oldest of 6, I'm pretty bratty. It's kind of like bratty, and also kind of...
Were you headstrong?
Yeah. I mean, I can fight any boys in my neighborhood growing up. I mean, I would have like a spitting contest with the boys. And anyway, so I just felt like at that time, I felt like I'm trusting my parents. And even though now looking back, I can't even imagine them having to make this decision. No. Because, honestly, they don't know if they will ever see me and my sister again. They don't know that, right? But they have to make this hard decision because they knew that at least 2 of their kids may have a better life elsewhere than Vietnam.
Well, I mean, that's huge. And I've raised kids, and I understand you've raised your kids. And I cannot imagine at 10 and 12 years old sending them away and knowing never see them again.
I remember saying...
What an amazing thing.
Saying goodbye to my little brother. He was 2 years old, and that night we slept in a mosquito enclosement. That's how we sleep in Vietnam.
Under
I remember
a net?
Mosquito net. I remember hugging my brother and one of my sister, 2 of the other sister. It was summer, so there was no school. So 2 of the sisters did visit some of our relatives elsewhere. I remember thinking, this is maybe the last time I get to see 2 of my siblings and my parents. And I just, that morning when my dad took my sister and I to the coast to leave on this riverboat, looking back and seeing my mom there, not sure if I ever see her again. That was hard.
Oh, well, I can't even imagine. I also can't imagine not just your side, but I can't even imagine the parent side of it. But so you got on the boat though, and you're on there, and you do have some family ties on the boat with you. You have an aunt, uncle, and some cousins.
Yes.
How many total?
There was 2 sets of aunts and uncles and 2 of their kids.
Okay. And then how many people total on the boat? I mean, is this
It's about 400.
Oh, this is not a small boat.
No, well, no, it's a small boat, but they fit as many people in there as as they can, and there was not room. There was only room just to sit. There's not even room to lay down. And I remember one time my sister and I had our backs together just to sleep because there's no room to lay down.
All right. I heard you speak. This was not a smooth voyage, this boat. And you were actually at some point intercepted by pirates, am I right?
Yes.
Okay. How'd that go?
Well, not very well. But, well, first of all, the South China Sea was full of pirates at that time. And because they knew that the Vietnamese refugees carry gold and jewelries with them to start their lives elsewhere, right?
Right.
So piracy is, I think it was estimated that a quarter of the refugee boat people was robbed by pirates.
Wow.
And they're from Thailand and other, Malaysia, Indonesia, and all that. But yeah, we were, after several days at sea, we actually landed in Malaysia.
So you went ashore in Malaysia, or is this before the pirates or after?
This is okay. So this part may be a little bit sensitive,
Okay.
in a way, but this is the truth. We landed in Malaysia, and we thought we were going to be rescued. Well, the Malaysian Navy came out, and they tied our boat to their boat, and they pulled us out to the sea.
Oh, wow.
And we thought we were getting pulled to somewhere like a refugee camp or something. They pulled us out to sea where there's no people that can see them. They robbed us.
The Malaysian Navy.
Yes, because they were in uniform.
Wow. Wow. Did you have any personal items of your own stolen? Were there any people that were taken? I mean,
Yeah,
I would
well,
imagine human trafficking is also an issue sometimes in this.
that would have happened, I believe, with all my heart. But if it wasn't for the grace of God, God intervened during this situation because a huge storm was brewing. So they started robbing people, and they found a bunch. They came over with metal detector,
Yeah.
and the captain of our boat has hidden some gold on the boat, and they found the gold, and it was a lot of gold. And so they were busy doing that, and then they make people strip off their jewelry. And I remember my mom had sent some jewelry with us, some gold bracelets and necklaces and stuff. And my sister and I actually strip them off of us, and we would stuff them in our mouths just
wow.
to hide from the pirates. So that was saved. But they found a lot of gold from the captain that they didn't want to bother with the people too much. And even while they were robbing us, there was this huge storm brewing really fast, and they wanted to get out of there.
Sometimes God calms a storm, and sometimes He brings a storm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the storm was brewing really fast, and they were trying to rob us really fast, so they didn't search everybody.
So you got to keep yours.
So my family got to keep ours.
Wow.
Jewelry. But that storm got them out of there. And their plan was they disabled our engine and threw some of our provision overboard. So they think that storm was going to capsize our
They
little boat.
disabled the engine, left the boat just adrift?
Yes.
Okay.
So they were hoping that storm would capsize our boat and kill all of us. So they don't have to do the killing themselves. We believe that is their plan. But that storm, if they didn't capsize our boat, that they were hoping we would be floating in the South China Sea, starved to death because they disabled our engine. We couldn't go anywhere.
How long did you stay adrift after that?
Several days.
Wow.
Several days adrift. And that storm actually carried us to Indonesia, closer to Indonesia.
Which is where you wound up
Yes.
in a refugee camp, am I
Yes, yes. So the Indonesians saw a boat and they came out and they helped us.
That's an amazing circumstance.
Yeah, exactly. God just intervened.
How about that?
I believe that with all my heart.
Well, I believe it with you. So you got to Indonesia, and at this point, I mean, this has been a journey already, but you're not through.
No.
And now you go into a refugee camp that I saw one of your speeches, and it sounds like it was not really a well-established camp when you first got there. It was more like survival. Am I right?
Right. We were the second boat that arrived on that refugee camp.
Okay.
There was one other Vietnamese refugee boat there already. But every day, more refugees arrive on this island, and there was nothing on this island. There were not even shelter for us. Food was really scarce. There was still a little bit food that we brought with us, and we ate what we had. And then we start eating things that we can found on the island. If you're lucky, you can catch fish out of the sea. But we ended up, and I remember eating things like snails and trying to find leaves and barks and grubs that I ended up eating.
I heard you say on one speech that you could go on the show Survivor and do really well.
Yes, I think I can. I really can.
There's big money in that. Well, but as a kid, so you're only 12 years old, and now you're eating grubs and making your own shelter, and you and your extended family are among how many people in this camp?
Well, like I said, thousands of people. I think it was estimated about almost half a million refugees by the time that camp closed.
Wow. Who was running the camp? Was there an organized agency that was helping assist the camp, or was it just makeshift?
Not yet. We were there for several months before the international organization found that there were refugees there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what organizations wound up coming to your aid at some point?
It was CARE International.
CARE, yeah.
And World Vision.
Okay.
The Catholic, I think some Catholic church
Okay.
organization.
Red Cross or UN, did they show up at all?
I can't remember. I just remember CARE, CARE, and I remember World Vision.
Well, so...
Oh, and I do remember there was a ship that parked right outside of our camp eventually after several months, and it's called Sea Swift or something like
Was
that.
it one of the Mercy ships at a hospital?
It's kind of like the Mercy ship because there were doctor and nurses that come in every day from the ship, and they made a little hut-like, little makeshift hospital there for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a Mercy ship.
Well, so once the aid organizations began coming in, and realized you're still in a refugee camp, so everything's very relative. But did life improve? I mean, did you have food? Did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, life did improve. They brought in a lot of medicine for. Oh, that's another thing. There were people that start dying of dysentery.
Oh yeah.
If you're not dying of starvation, you die of dysentery.
I had dysentery in Afghanistan, and it's not fun.
Oh my gosh, that's what I had in the refugee. I almost died. I really thought I was going to die, honestly. In the refugee, I had dysentery so bad. But eventually they came in, they brought medication for all of us and food, lots of food.
In fact, now that you say that, I remember one of your speeches, you said to this day you still get a hankering for Spam once in a while because they brought Spam.
Yes, yes. That's where I learned how to eat Spam, yes. We still have Spam. Right now in our pantry, we always have Spam.
Well, it's funny what sticks with you like that. So you're in this refugee camp. Living conditions may have gotten somewhat improved, but you're still not in a good place. Is your family still intact? Everybody's still together?
Everybody's still together. And one of my uncle who serves in the Navy for the South Vietnamese Navy, so because he served, he get to pick what country to immigrate to.
Okay.
And of course, we picked the United States of America. Everybody wanted to come here.
Yeah.
This is the place.
Was it? And let me ask you about that because, in my time overseas and in my time in Afghanistan, I actually lived among the Afghan people for a year, and it's amazing. People who have never been to America still have an idealized version of what's here.
Yeah.
So you had never seen America, but you had seen Americans, I guess, during the Vietnam War.
I have never had no.
So you had
No.
no interaction with
No
Americans
interaction.
before. What was the never having seen it? What was the mental image you had of America?
Cold.
It was cold.
Yes.
Okay.
What I remember as a little kid, always hearing that America is so cold.
Okay.
And even when we were in refugee camp and getting ready to come here to America, whatever money left, my aunt and uncle left, they brought us wool sweaters
Okay.
to come to America.
They hadn't been to the South.
No, and it was July when we came, and we wore high neck, 100% wool sweater arriving to Huntsville International Airport.
What did you imagine about life in America before you ever got here? What was your did you have certain things you expected to see or you couldn't wait to see? Or
I could imagine, because my life before communism, we had French things like cheese and butter and champagne and all that, and I thought, and we've always heard that America is even better than that. So as a little kid, I think about living in a castle, living in places, that has carpet, and I don't know. It's just like a fairy tale, I guess. As a little kid, I just thinking America is like a fairy tale story.
Well, so the day came when you found out there was a sponsor in Athens, Alabama, of all places,
Athens, Alabama.
that was willing to sponsor a family from the camp.
Yes.
How did it turn out to be your family, and what was that like?
I think it was the Van Kirks of Athens. Mrs. Van Kirk was a Catholic, and there was a nun that came to her St. Paul Church and spoke on the plight of the refugee people, and said, well, they need sponsor. They need to get out of the camp. They need sponsor. And it just really touched her heart. And that's when she and her husband decided to sponsor a family. And the Catholic Church placed our family with her family.
Did they have any limits, like we can only take 4, or did they say we'll sponsor whatever they consider to be their family and we'll take the whole thing?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. I never asked her that question, and now she has long passed away.
So who notified you in the camp that you were going to be going to America?
It was one of the organization. I guess it's the Catholic organization.
Well, all right. So how did you come to America? By boat? By plane? What happened?
By plane.
Okay.
Yeah. We when
Is that
we
the first
left.
time you ever flew?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we left the original camp and moved to another bigger camp for 3 months. And there we were examined by the doctors and x-ray our lung to make sure we don't have TB. Some of us did have TB, and so it took a little bit longer to be on medication to get rid of it before we came to America. So we were there 3-4 months there on medications and make sure that we're healthy before we entered the U.S. So, and then we flew to Singapore. No, they took us to Singapore by boat, and we stayed there another week behind an enclosed camp there just to get us ready to come to America. And then there we flew to Seattle, Washington. That was the gateway.
Okay.
And then from there to Dallas, I think, and then Dallas to Huntsville International Airport.
So what was your first impression of the real America? I mean, what's the first thing that you like looking back on it? What was the first thing that really struck you? I am in America. What did you see or hear or smell or
The
feel?
airport.
The airport? Okay.
And there was this lady at the airport walking around with a basket of big red, delicious apples. And I remember the smell of the apple and the look of the apple. We get apple in Vietnam, but they're all bruised and everything because they're shipped from somewhere, But this was like so perfect. And I'm thinking, America is going to be like that red, delicious apple.
Wow.
Everything is perfect. Everything smells so good. That was my first impression of America.
It's again, it's one of those things where I think sometimes we take for granted where we are. It is way too easy for Americans, having always lived in the first world, to really appreciate what we have until you go somewhere and realize what they don't have.
Yeah.
But you came from just the opposite. You came from a period of time where your family had everything, then you lost everything and had literally nothing, and now you're here.
Yeah.
And red apples made a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally, I don't think we even have a penny to our name when we came to America. We have nothing left.
Well, that brings up a point. So you came to America, but then what? I mean, so did they give you a job, a house? So now what? You've been sponsored, but what does that mean?
Yeah. So when we got to Athens, Alabama, the community of Athens and our sponsor provide us an apartment, a furnished apartment. And I remember seeing it for the first time. I remember take my shoes off and feel that carpet under my feet. It was so luxurious.
Wow.
And having flush toilet.
Oh, wow.
We didn't have to squat
Yeah.
to use the toilet. Running water, washer and dryer, soft beds. I remember open that refrigerator that was full of food.
Oh, they stocked the refrigerator for you too.
Yes. I remember seeing chicken in there that I didn't have to chase after, killed and plugged and cleaned.
Wow.
And gosh, I remember that bed was so soft that even one of my cousin, the boy, he was just 3 years old, and because he's got used to sleeping on the hard floor in the refugee camp, that he couldn't handle the soft bed. So every morning we would go wake him up. He'd be sleeping on the floor next to the bed.
Wow.
A different family come every single week to take us to the store, to take us to the health department, to take us to the dentist, enrolled us kids in school. They came taught us English.
So they didn't just sponsor your trip; they sponsored your family to live.
Yes.
Wow.
To help us be successful.
Was this out of one church, or was this a group of friends? What was this?
It was that family, and they included their friends and two churches. Mr. Van Kirk was a Presbyterian. Mrs. Van Kirk was a Catholic. So they had two churches involved.
Okay.
And then, of course, their family and their friends also. So it was not like a government program. It was just the people in the community rallying together to help this refugee family. And I tell you, we would not be a successful family if it wasn't for the community of Athens.
I think you just nailed something too. You know, in communism, the government does everything.
Yes.
But
yes,
you came here, and it was private citizens who did everything.
That's right.
And they did it out of the joy of their hearts.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
That refrigerator, you talked about that in one of the speeches I watched. You talked about that refrigerator, and you said a few things just now. There was chicken in there. You didn't have to catch it and pluck it first. But you also talked about one time when you thought you needed to eat some ice cream that was in the freezer.
Yes. So of course, we came from a refugee camp, so food was, you eat everything.
You don't waste anything.
You don't waste anything.
Yeah.
So one day we're just sitting around, looking in the freezer and refrigerator and see what we can try. And we took out this tube of thing that looked like an orange sherbet.
Okay.
And we all took a spoon to get us try this American orange-looking sherbet. And we all went, oh my goodness, this tastes terrible. It was so strong. But because we just came from refugee camp, we sat there and ate a whole tube of orange sherbet.
And it wasn't orange sherbet.
No, a few days later, our sponsor, Mrs. Van Kirk, came over and she helped to make breakfast American breakfast for us. You know, the southern grits and the bacon and the eggs. And she went into the freezer to look for this orange looking sherbet tube, and she couldn't find it. And we told an interpreter that we ate it, and it was horrible. And the interpreter told us that it wasn't sherbet; it was actually orange juice concentrate that we ate.
Oh my gosh, I bet that was strong. That'd take the enamel right off your teeth.
Yeah.
Well, you know, but I think you made a point though. Having come from where you come from, you don't waste anything.
No.
You don't. And I would bet that was more than just food. It was probably everything. Everything had purpose, and everything could be repurposed if necessary. Well, so you just mentioned a minute ago, though, you were working through an interpreter. How was the language barrier? You come to America, it's the land of promise. It's the fairy tale you're talking about. There's a stocked refrigerator and soft beds, but you don't speak the language. So how was that barrier overcome?
Well, there was an interpreter, and her name is Anne, and she show up once in a while to help, interpret. But most of the time, we don't have her. So we just point. A lot of time, we just point at each other or point at things, and there was a lot of smiles. There was a lot of nodding.
Nodding heads.
Yeah. And we just follow them whatever they want us to do. We're just so grateful to their kindness and the community.
Well, and I heard too, you learned to speak Southern American.
I did. 2 syllables to everything. Right?
2 syllables to everything. And one of the things I saw you say a lot of times, you'll say y'all and then laugh about it.
Yes.
Because you grew up in South Vietnam, so it fits.
Exactly. Love the South.
Well, so all right, you're a kid with a language barrier from another country, learning that there's places in the world that you can actually turn on the water and turn on the electricity and and that everything typically works. But you still have to find your way. I mean, at some point, the other people sponsoring you are going to have to say, we need to help you find a job, or we need to help you get in school. So how did life begin to normalize, and when did your family begin to be able to do things without the assistance of others?
Yeah, it was probably, they were with us for at least a couple of years, believe it or not.
That's amazing.
Isn't it?
That's the goodness of people right there.
Oh, my goodness.
Praise God.
The love that they shown is just unbelievable. Some of them with us, checking in on us, even after a year or two, they were still checking in on us. And and they found jobs for my uncle at Conagra at the chicken plant there in Athens. He started working there and earned some money. And us kids were enrolled in school. Okay. And the school was, oh my goodness, they were so loving. I remember my 3rd grade teacher, because I didn't know the language, she had picked a child out the class to follow me everywhere I went to make sure I didn't get lost.
Wow. But you said 3rd grade, but you were probably 13 or 14 years old by now, right?
I was 13, yeah, because I spent 14 months in the refugee camp. At this point, I was near 15. Because
that's usually middle school, almost high school age, but you're in 3rd grade.
Yes.
So I guess they had to do an assessment to find out where you were academically and place you?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So you were older than all the kids?
Yes. Yeah.
Did it matter?
No, I'm not. I wasn't any bigger than them, actually. Oh. I was smaller. I was malnourished from the camp, and I was smaller than some of them, actually.
Wow.
And they would, at that time, I don't think they have the ESL
English second language.
Yeah, program yet.
Yeah.
But one of the language teacher pulled me out of class every day for an hour or so and worked with me.
Okay.
On the language. Yeah.
I've seen more than once that in families that come from foreign countries that the children learn the language quicker than the adults.
Absolutely.
Did you become the interpreter for the family?
Pretty much.
Yeah?
Yeah. My sister and I were, yeah. pretty much. My aunt and uncle eventually they learned English, and they both went to Calhoun and earned an associate degree.
Oh, yeah. For those who don't know, it's Calhoun Community College. So
Yes.
that's outstanding. So
Yeah.
they were pursuing not just living; they were pursuing like improving their lot in life and doing which is also amazing because I think we have so many Americans that grew up in the first world they forget the opportunities they have around them.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's what immigrants like me see, that America is full of opportunities. And that's why all immigrants want to come here, because they see those opportunities that we as Americans sometimes miss living here.
Well, so how long were you? Did you stay in a grade level below your age?
No,
throughout?
after third grade, they decided to skip the fourth grade. So I skipped fourth grade and I continued to go to school. And I was 22 when I graduated from high school. From
22?
Athens. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did anybody know that you were 22?
No. No. Because at that time I probably could buy alcohol.
Well, yeah, probably could. You might have been the best friend.
Yes.
So, you came from a vastly different culture with a vastly different perspective on life and also maybe a deeper appreciation for what is needed versus what is wanted.
Right.
But then you got into like American junior high and American high school. And did you enjoy high school? Was it fun? Did you do sports or anything? What was it? No.
So we saw the opportunities that was here in America for us, and we knew that we left relatives at home that are struggling.
Yeah.
So I didn't have your typical high school, high schooler that's going to sport and going to doing all these things that high schooler do. And at that time in Athens, every Friday night they would ride around the square in their car, with their music blasting. That was the thing to do. Yeah. I didn't get to do any of that stuff because I was working.
Okay, where'd you work?
So my aunt and uncle, they earned an associate degree from Calhoun Community College, and they both got jobs. And from that, they saved their money enough to buy a Chinese restaurant.
Really?
In Huntsville, which is 30 minutes, about 20 at that time, about 20 minutes drive from Athens.
Okay, yep.
So they bought the restaurant, and so I worked there, 7 days a week in high school.
All right, so I grew up in Huntsville.
Yeah.
You know that. You know some of my family. We
Yes.
discovered earlier. Where was the restaurant?
It's no longer there.
Okay.
It was a Hong Kong Chinese restaurant on North Parkway before you get to Max Luther.
Yeah. I think
It's
I've eaten
right-
there.
No way. I might have served you.
You might have. That's crazy.
Yeah. So let's see. It was right next to, it was attached to a hotel that has the orange roof.
The orange roof. Yeah.
Oh.
Your husband's over here wanted to say
Yeah,
it. Don't worry
I
about
know,
it. But
I know.
but the reality is, so your family
oh,
had a
gosh.
restaurant and you worked in it. How many days a week did you work there?
7 days.
Oh, so you went to school and worked 7 days a week.
I would go to school. After school, I would drive up to Huntsville and work there, waiting tables. And in between waiting tables, I'm doing my homework.
So you've definitely got a work ethic.
Yes.
The restaurant was where you spent the majority of your free time, which wasn't really free, but was the whole family involved in the restaurant?
Yes. My aunt and uncle, of course, my aunt would quit her job to run the restaurant. My uncles continued to work just to keep the insurance.
Yeah.
And my sister would stay back home to take care of their boys who were still in school. But I helped with the restaurant during the week. And then on the weekend, everybody, the whole family worked. On Friday night, Saturday and Sunday, the whole family worked in the restaurant.
I think the other thing that too often Americans miss, and not everybody, because there's entrepreneurial spirit here. Mm-hmm. There's still a great sense of industry in the United States, and there are people that appreciate what we have, but there's also people too often that become complacent and don't realize that sometimes hard work really does pay off. Mm-hmm. And that's also honoring God. That's a stewardship of what he gave you.
Exactly.
Part of stewarding is even your time.
Right.
The relationships that you had with the sponsors who were with you for 2 years. One of the things that strikes me, there's a passage, and I've got to think where it is right now, but I think it's in 1 Thessalonians, but it says, because you had become so dear to us, we were content not only to share the gospel with you, but even our very lives as well. Meaning that what you had was a deep relationship with these people. Did that continue even after the first 2 years? Did the families you had seen that sponsored you and helped you, were they still around? Were you still seeing them?
Yeah. We still continue to see some of them. Yeah.
You said something in one of your speeches too about something. I'm jumping around a little bit, but you said something about one of the things that really got you was a Salvation Army angel tree.
Yeah. That first Christmas in America. I was 13.
Okay.
And then my sister, who was 10, 11, and then I have three. My aunt and uncle had 3 boys. They're younger. So that very first Christmas, I woke up, don't understand anything about Christmas.
You grew up Buddhist? Is that right? I think I heard you say that. Yeah.
I grew up, well, my family, Buddhist, but we weren't like practicing Buddhist, religiously or anything like that. I think it was just one of those things that you kind of pass on from your ancestor.
It was cultural religion as much as anything.
Yeah. And so I remember waking up Christmas morning, and there was a Christmas tree that's decorated. And there's these big mesh bag. At that time, it was the angel tree. Came from the Salvation Angel Tree, which I didn't know that it came from Salvation Angel Tree, Salvation Angels Tree program.
Yeah,
I didn't know that, but I remember waking up, seeing that the tree and these big mesh bag that full of toys and oranges, and I remember at that time. Now I'm dated back. The little strawberry shortcake dolls, that smell just like strawberry shortcake. I remember smelling it for the first time. And it makes such an impression. I'm like, who did this? Who would do this for us? It would just make such a big impression on me that a few years later, I found out that it was the Salvation Army Angel Tree, and I wanted to volunteer there. Oh, wow. And help. And so I got to volunteer with that program for several years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Give back.
To give back.
Yeah.
Because it makes such a huge impression on me.
Well, so let me ask you this. So you came to America with, you called it a fairy tale ideal of what America might be, never having seen it. Mm-hmm. Now you've been here for a few years. Was it living up to expectations?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
So no deflation, no loss of the ideal?
No. Part of it because we knew what communism did to our country. And we knew that my parents and some of my 4 siblings and cousins and aunts and uncles in Vietnam, I knew that they were struggling so badly that anything is better than what they are living. And America's given us these opportunities we're just so grateful to whatever America gave us, and we seize it, and work really hard. I've always, when I go and speak to kids now, I've always like, you don't have to be the smartest kid in the classroom. You just got to show up and work. That's all.
I practiced law, and I was told by an old lawyer back when I was a new lawyer. I won't say young because I wasn't young, but I was told by an old lawyer when I was a new lawyer. He said, you don't have to be the smartest lawyer in town. You just have to be the hardest working one.
Yep.
He said, most lawyers are lazy. He said, you do the work and do the research and prepare yourself. You'll beat the smartest lawyer in town every time.
Exactly. Wise words.
They are wise words. I actually shared them with another young lawyer later because now I'm the old lawyer. Well, so let me ask you something. You mentioned a moment ago, you knew back home that your family that you had left behind lived still in a struggle in many ways. Did you have communication with them? Did you know how they were doing? Did you write back and forth? What?
Yes.
Okay.
We did. At that time, we wrote back and forth, and it would take months. And everything we wrote to them was open by the communists.
Oh.
And they would read our letters, because I knew that, because when I received letters from home, my parents and sibling would date the letter, so I knew it would take several months. And all of my letters that I received had been opened. And I remember one time I even slipped $1 or $2 in my letter, and my dad wrote back and told us not to do that anymore because they won't get it.
Wow.
It was open and read and sealed.
But at least they knew you were safe.
Yes.
How long did it take before they knew you were safe?
6 or 8 months.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you were able to get a message to them while you were in the refugee camp?
When the organization came and helped us, we wrote a letter to my cousin in Australia, and they delivered to my cousin in Australia. And my cousin in Australia wrote to my parents, said that your family is in a refugee camp in Indonesia.
That had to
That's
be
how they, because my mom, I found out later in 93 when I went back that my mom, the market in Vietnam is, people go to the market in Vietnam a lot, every day, right?
Like the street markets.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also a social place, a place where people catch up with their neighbors, and find out,
All the
gossip going on. And every day she would go to the market and she would hear so-and-so left, but they didn't survive the sea.
Oh, wow.
So-and-so was robbed by pirates and they killed everyone. It got to the point where my parents hadn't heard from us for months. My mom was so distraught. She thought that she might have sent her kids to die, because she hadn't heard from us for months, and she didn't think that we had survived. She said, "I can't hear this anymore," so she stopped going to the market, and she shut herself upstairs in one of the rooms until she could hear if we had survived or not.
Wow.
And my sister said one time she went to spend some time with my grandmother for the summer and came back, and my mom was sitting there, and she didn't even recognize my mom because my mom had lost so much weight, and she was just grieving, thinking that we didn't survive.
Wow. But you did. Mm-hmm. You came to the United States. Life is better. And were you able to communicate with them directly at that point? Were those letters, you weren't having to go through Australia anymore. You were sending letters directly.
Right.
Wow. So you're 22 years old leaving high school, but you met a guy named John at some point, who's sitting over here to my left. And you and John now have been married for a lot of years.
It'll be 35 years this June.
Yeah. My wife, Charlene, and I are at 38.
Wow.
But you and John met, and I saw you give a speech to a church, and you said that John had already decided he was going to marry an Asian woman because God had told him that.
Yes.
And then he met you.
Yes.
And I guess that was it.
Yeah.
But you also had some friends who prayed you two together. Mm-hmm. Tell that story.
Okay, so let's see how. So John went on a mission trip, Central America, and he was engaged to a lovely young lady in North Alabama. Well, during his mission trip, he realized she wasn't the one for him. So when he got back, he broke up their engagement. So a few months after that, he was going down an escalator at the Parisian. If you live in North Alabama, there was a mall there.
I did.
With a store called Parisians.
Yeah.
Well, he was buying a gift for a baby shower, and he came down this escalator, and he saw this older Asian lady at the end of the escalator where there was some makeup counters.
Yeah.
And he had a flashback that when he was a kid, he saw himself marry an Asian person, a woman. And so he said, he did out loud, he said, "God, that's what I need."
Apparently he was right.
And so the next day when he went to the baby shower, he saw a friend, and his friend said, "We have this girl we want you to meet. She's a friend of my girlfriend, who at that time was my best friend in high school. And John's like, I don't really want to date a high school girl.
Because he was older, right?
Right. He graduated from UAH, has his engineering degree and all that stuff. He was 25. And he said, no, I don't really want to date a high school girl. And his friend said, oh, no, she's actually 22 years old.
But she's still in high school.
Yeah, she's still in high school. And he said, no, I don't really want to date a stupid high school girl. And they're like, no, she's actually 22. And they had to explain why I was 22 in high school. I didn't know English and all that. And they had this a grainy high school newspaper of me winning some sort of award. And they showed it to him, and he said, oh, okay, I'll meet him and her. And so he came on our awards night, and that's how I met him. And I knew he was the one right away. I wasn't even allowed to date at that time.
Oh, you weren't allowed to date.
I've never
Okay,
dated.
so how did this go over?
Yeah. So I knew
tell
he
your
was,
uncle and aunt what's going on now, right?
It took me several months. I had to work up the courage.
Did he have to come to the restaurant?
Oh my gosh, he ate so much Chinese food. So much. I mean, this is a guy that doesn't even eat black pepper. You know, he was forced to eat a lot of Chinese food. So I went to my aunt and uncle and said, I met this guy, and I think, I really like him. I'd like to know him. And my aunt said, well, you work 7 days a week, so you can't date.
They were cutting you no slack.
No, you work 7 days a week, and if he wanted to see you, he had to come to the restaurant. So John would come to the restaurant after work almost every single day. And we would chat. We write a lot of letters to each other, so we would trade letters when he come over, and then I would talk to him while I was running tables here and there, one slow time or whatever. And he ate a lot of Chinese food, learned to eat a lot of Chinese food at that time. And he even one day took off from his engineering job because our dishwasher didn't show up. And he took off one day just to wash dishes.
Well, he's making points at that point. All right, so at what stage in this relationship did your aunt and uncle go, okay, you can date him? When did that happen?
After we got engaged.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
your relationship is already serious, but they're still not letting you go out on dates.
No, until he committed to me and proposed. It's when they let me one day off so that I can plan my wedding.
Wow, that's great. That's a good story.
Yeah.
And my grandparents met on a blind date, and they eloped a week later.
Wow.
And they were married for 50 years.
Wow.
Sometimes it happens.
It happens. My parents was arranged.
Was it really?
Yeah. My mom didn't meet my dad until the night before the wedding.
Little known fact, I was on a date with another girl when I met my wife. I didn't date that other girl anymore after that.
See, you never know.
Never know. Well, so you had there's a major life change. Mm-hmm. You've now gone through high school in America. You've got a job. You've got a new life, a new language. Your family back in Vietnam knows that you're safe, and now you got a new relationship. But the other relationship that started around that time was your relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yes. So while my uncle was working it was 3M at that time, we also were custodians to the Presbyterian Church in Athens. And during the few years that the sponsor come in and out of our lives, they also encouraged us to go to church with them. Mm. And so we went to church several times, and we were also custodians. So I see pamphlets about Jesus. I knew a little bit about him, but I wasn't like ready to embrace, Christianity because I didn't really understand a whole lot. And then when John come over to our restaurant every day, he would bring his Bible to read, and we would have discussion. And unbeknown to me, his whole church was praying for me.
Which means they were also praying for him.
Yes. And so that Sunday that I got off from work that one day to plan our wedding, I went to church with him that one Sunday in August, and
What year was that?
1989.
Okay.
So August 1989, I went to church with him, and it just, I had a lovely time, but nothing that really stirred my spirit.
Nothing earth-shattering?
Nothing earth-shattering. So that night we went back to church, and the pastor was asking all of us to bow head and pray, and something was stirring in me. And when he said, "Is anyone here?" He was given that invitation, and he said, "There." It was several minutes, and I was not fighting it, but something was stirring in me, and my hand just flew up. Honestly, I don't know what happened. It's like something has tied to my hand and just went right up. And then he said, with every head bowed and every eyes closed, would you like to come up here? And so I start walking toward the aisle, and then I start walking up to the church.
This is the church that's been praying for you?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I start hearing these rustling noises in the back of me as I was walking up to the altar, and I'm like, what's going on? So I turn around, and everyone from the congregation was following me up to the altar because all of them was been praying for me to be saved that day. And I had at first I thought, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? But now I know all those people have been praying for me for months, that I get that day off and that I will be saved on that Sunday. And God had answered their prayer, and they came with me to the altar, and all of them was at the altar just praising God.
Wow.
For answer prayer.
Wow.
So
that is something
I'm
else.
It's so humbling.
Yeah.
To have strangers to pray for you.
Well,
you've had
the intervention of strangers in your life for years at this point.
Yeah.
Wow. Can I ask you, did you share your new faith with your family? Did you go back and tell them what happened?
No.
Okay. So.
No, I didn't.
Would you think was it one of those things that was just a little difficult to talk about, or?
Very difficult to talk about. Yeah. Eventually, I did share my faith with them, and they knew that. They knew that because I chose to marry in the church. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. What I would say though too is that you not only accepted Christ, you apparently embraced that relationship with the Lord, but then at the same time you were doing so, and it was not comfortable. At the same time, it was comfortable, but yet not comfortable.
Right. Yeah.
You were stepping out.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this: you and John got married. You started a family. How many kids do you have?
We have 2.
And they're grown now?
They're grown. We have one that's about to turn 31 and one that's going to be 33.
Okay. Well, they're about the same age my kids. Mm-hmm. You have grandkids yet?
No.
Oh, it's coming.
No.
But what I heard in one of your speeches was an amazing piece where in 1993 you went back to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. I did.
Was there any risk in that, by the way?
Oh, gosh, huge risk.
Really?
Because at that time we were sponsoring my whole family to come to America.
Okay.
And honestly, we had like a foot of paperwork that we had to do to fill out. There's 6 of them.
Was that Vietnamese paperwork or State Department U.S.
Both.
paperwork? Both.
Both.
Okay.
And so we knew that if we take some of those paperwork to Vietnam, it might escalate because when we did the paperwork, a lawyer told us that it would take 5 to 10 years to sponsor them.
Okay.
But we also heard from other Vietnamese community that sponsoring their kids, that if you take those paperwork to Vietnam, it might, help to escalate the time to move it faster.
So look someone in the eye, and it might help.
And so we decided, and also I was at this time I was 15 years separated from my family.
Yeah.
And I got married and have a little baby. She was 4 months old and the first grandchild. And I really want I miss my family so much at that time. And I also want them to meet their first grandbaby and meet John.
So you're taking the baby with you and John?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was a huge risk because at that time there was still embargo. The U.S. and America and Vietnam. There's not a relationship between those two
Yeah,
countries.
I'm trying to think what year we normalized relations, but it was not 1993. We weren't there yet.
No, so we took a huge risk because there's not an embassy. If something was to happen to us, no one would know. We went through Mexico to go to Vietnam.
Oh, wow. So you couldn't even fly direct.
And if something happened to us and the communists decided to throw us in jail, no one would know except families because we're traveling there illegally, But we were desperate, and I wanted to get my family out. And I knew that there was other Vietnamese people that had already done it, and they got home safe, back to America safe. So we did it. So we went.
What was it like going home? What were the initial impressions of stepping back on Vietnamese soil, and what was it like to see your family?
I remember
And I assume your mother and father were still living?
They were still living.
Okay.
And so I remember seeing they all showed up at the airport. And
Did you land where'd you land?
Tăng Sơn Nhất,
Okay.
Saigon
Okay.
airport. And seeing them for the first time, it was, oh my goodness, it was amazing. And we went to my hometown and stayed there for a whole month.
A month? This was not a quick trip?
No, we stayed there for a whole month. And we took the paperwork to the government there. And while we were there, that whole month, they got an invitation to go and have an interview to come to America. So we got to witness that, that joy that they had. And it was so funny because when they did the interview, okay, we already left Vietnam. John and I and the baby already left Vietnam. And when they did the interview, they went into this interview, and it was an American person that interviewed them.
Okay.
And I think he spoke Vietnamese or also have an interpreter there. And he looked at the paperwork, and there was one sister, when we sponsor her, she fall under so all of the minor fall under the parents. We sponsor the parents, and all the minor get to go with the parents.
Okay.
But when we sponsor her, she was still a minor. But when the paperwork went through and all that, she no longer become an adult, no longer a minor. So she actually fall into a different category.
Okay.
And her category of sponsoring a sibling take longer than sponsoring a parent. But the interviewer, I remember Mom said she was so scared of that interview. And the interviewer, his name was Frank. I don't know his last name. We thank God for Frank every single day. Because Frank looked at the paperwork and said, oh, you got one child here that fall under a different category. Well, I think I'm going to reunite this family. I'm going to put her under the parents. So that one sister, that was going to take 10 years for her to come to the U.S. or longer.
So Frank was not a bureaucrat. Frank was a human being who saw something he could do and help.
Yes, and he said this family needs to be reunited. So he put that one sister
under
my parents. And we thank God for Frank.
Well, how long did it take to get? I
And
got so many questions.
And so they, when we did the paperwork, the lawyers and the government said it take 5 years,
right,
for the parents and the siblings. It took 1.5 years.
Oh, okay. So you beat the system, basically,
Yes.
and maybe going over there was the best thing to do.
Yes. Not only that, a whole church was praying
Same
over
church?
that paperwork. Same church. Pray over that paperwork.
I need to meet this church.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in Decatur, Alabama. Okay. But the people in my parents' hometown that was sponsored by their family that left Vietnam like I did,
Yeah.
their came and told my parents, how is it that it's only a year and a half and you guys are getting ready to come to the U.S.? And they're like, who does your son-in-law know?
He must be a very important person.
Yes, that's what I like.
He knows Jesus.
Yes, exactly.
That's awesome. So I got to step back, though, and I got to ask, your mother grieved so hard for you and your sister when you left. And by the way, do you still, your sister is still here, I guess?
Yes, they're all here, yeah.
How was your mother? Now, obviously, she knew you were safe well before that because she'd been getting letters.
Mm-hmm.
But how was your mother when she first got to see you again?
Oh, my mom, she was so emotional. And I mean, I think she really loved to see us, but I think she loved to see that grandbaby more than us, which is, normal, right?
It is.
So, yeah, she couldn't believe that we had survived all of that. So we didn't really tell my parents that a lot of things that happened in the refugee camp and the piracy and all that stuff, because, I told them in person when we saw them in 93, you couldn't believe all the things that we had to go through just to make it to the U.S.
Did you just sit for hours and talk?
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. And the struggles that they went through. One of my sister was learning how to embroider, and she couldn't even afford to buy the threads, to learn to embroider and all the things that they went through. And then you remember that communist family that moved in and lived with us?
Yeah.
That I told when we first talked about this.
Are they still there?
Well, they're no longer there. But what happened was that they showed up, the husband and wife, and I think 2 or 3 kids, and they're about my sisters and siblings' age. And so they didn't have a whole lot. So my parents shared. My parents gave them some of my parents' clothes, and my siblings gave them some of their kids some clothes. And then they also share some food with them too. And because of that kindness, my parents showed kindness to this family. When my sister and I left Vietnam, which is illegally because we didn't sign to go leave.
Yeah.
Well, they could have made trouble for my parents. So my parents told them that my sister and I went and visit our relatives for the summer. Well, summer came and gone, and school started, and we didn't come back. And so they could have made trouble to my parents, but they went to my parents and said, we know what happened to your daughters. We're not going to turn you in.
Amazing.
Because of my parents' kindness.
Just heaping kindness on them, and it wound up being the blessing later.
Yeah.
Hey, what'd your mom and dad think of your American husband?
Oh, they love him.
Yeah. He was well received?
He was very well received. Bless his heart. He's the hero of this story, seriously. Because when they moved here, all 6 of them and my sister that here with me, they all moved in and lived with us.
Holy cow.
So he was the only breadwinner for 11. We went from a family of 4 to a family of 11.
Wow.
Overnight.
How long did they live with you?
They lived with us for almost 2 years. Yeah. Yeah, they loved him. I mean, even today, my mom would call, hey, I'm cooking. What do you think John would like to eat? I'm like, what about me? No.
That's great.
But they loved him. They moved in, and they lived with us for almost 2 years. And when they left, he actually cried because he's like, he got to do all these other things that they're doing for him,
I heard you speak, too. You said that your mother got here just in time to see the birth of your son.
Yeah. Yeah, they came 2 weeks before our son, JB, was born. Because I remember being in the hospital and had my daughter. And I remember it was a joy occasion, of course, but I was grieving that my mom and my family wasn't there to witness it. And I remember thinking, God knows the desire of your heart, and within his will, he will answer that desire, that prayer.
Yeah.
And he knew how much I desire to have my family here so badly with that first child that came that 2 weeks before the second child arrived, they were here. My mom got to witness her second grandbaby arrive into the world. So
It's good stuff. Yeah. As we sit here right now, too, one of the things that's really struck me in sort of preparing for today, aside from all the things we've talked about, and your love of country, your new country, your love of family, is you have a real strong heart for Vietnam veterans.
I do. Oh my goodness. So
My dad did 2 tours in Vietnam, 2 very difficult tours.
yeah,
I don't know if you ever met my dad or not, but
I did not.
He would have liked to heard your story.
Oh,
But tell me about
okay.
your
So
heart for
this
vets.
all started in high school. The same friend that prayed for me has a dad that served in Vietnam.
Okay.
And for a long time, I knew he had a difficult time, still struggling. And the first time I met him, I went to him and thanked him for his service. And I watched him gotten so emotional, and he started crying, and we hugged, and Phil, he thought that I hate him.
Mm.
And that just broke my heart. He really thought that I hated him. And I said, how can I hate you? You were just a young man, leaving your country, leaving your family, leaving the comfort of America to go fight for people you don't know because you believe that everybody deserves to be free. No, I don't hate you. And that moment had stayed with me for so long. And that's just that helped embolden me to walk up to strangers, Vietnam veterans now that you see them, walking.
Wearing their hat.
Wear the hat. So
yeah.
you knew they're Vietnam veterans. And I just walk up to them. And I just looked at them, and I just want to thank them for all that they tried to do for the Vietnamese people. And I watched every single one of them just broke down. And I knew then that all the things I went through life, God has a purpose and a plan for me. And that's my ministry, is to serve the Vietnam veterans, because I knew they didn't come home to a very grateful nation. And that a lot of them, most of them probably never heard of a Vietnamese person thanking them for what they tried to do.
No kidding. A lot of them didn't hear about Americans thanking them for what they did.
I know, and I didn't know about the how they were treated until I hear stories from them.
Yeah.
Most of them was like spit on. Most of them were,
And my dad told that story about his own experience.
food thrown at them and accused them of being baby murderers. I had one veteran told me that he was injured in Vietnam, and he came back, and he were received so badly that he tells people that his injury was motorcycle accident. Wow. And he hid all of his time in Vietnam. And the burden that they had carried for so many years, being called a bad guy, my heart breaks for them. And I just felt like they all need to hear how appreciative they are.
Welcome home.
And welcome them home. I think Vietnam veterans are a group of veterans that are so cohesive, because when they came home, only their brothers can understand what all they went through. And their brothers are the only one that they shared what they've been through with. I have so many wives and daughters of Vietnam veterans that comes up to me and said, my husband have never talked about his time in Vietnam until he met you.
So thank you, by the way. What practically speaking is your ministry besides having that heart for them and extending that grace to them whenever you see them? And I know you wrote a book, but I've seen also you speak at veterans groups all the time.
I do.
when you say this is your ministry, is there a practical application to your ministry? Is there a goal or
Yeah, to reach as many Vietnam veterans and thank them for what they did. Try to do as much as possible. And in the meantime, also the testimony how God just in my life, throughout my life, I see God's hands now and the purpose that He has for every one of us. He has a purpose and plans for every one of us.
Yeah.
And I really believe that my purpose in life is to reach out to Vietnam veterans. And I speak to kids group and help them to realize what a great country this is. I mean,
That's huge.
They are, I tell them, I said, look, guys, y'all already won the lottery.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're born in America, you already won the lottery. Everybody want what you have. Everybody want what you have. You are living in the greatest country on earth. And I hope that if just one kid at least listen to what I had to say and really appreciate this country. I mean, I just felt like, that's my duty.
Well, I wish more Americans would take that same attitude. I mean, and not that we don't, but I mean, I just think that you bring a perspective on it that is so real because you've seen the other side. Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans not to harm you, but to prosper you, plans to give you a future and a hope. And I think I'll just go ahead and say it. I think you pretty much embody that verse. That being said, let me ask you this. I'm gonna close with this. Well, no, I want to ask about your book first. Your book is called The Ground Kisser. And I know Lisa Worthy-Smith assisted you with the book.
Right. That's another God story there.
It looks like a God story, and it's also been labeled as, it's got an award on there, one of the top 50 best indie books of the year in 2019. But first of all, why the title, Ground Kisser? Where'd that come from?
Well, the Ground Kisser actually, do you remember Barry Farber, the radio show host out of New York City?
I can place the name, but I can't quite. Okay.
I think he was Sean Hannity's mentor.
Okay.
And he did a radio show out of New York City that broadcast in Athens, Alabama. My husband.
And Sean Hannity started in Athens and Huntsville.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so my husband listened to Mr. Farber every single day. And one day Mr. Farber was talking about an immigrant that come to this country, and they're so thankful to be here that they get on the ground and kiss the ground. And John's like, he's talking about you. So I'm going to call in and tell him your story. So he actually got through to Mr. Farber, and he told Mr. Farber my story. And Mr. Farber said, well, your wife is a ground kisser. And so I knew that if I was to have my story written in a book, that's what it would be called.
How about that?
Yeah, and in 2020, during the COVID, I got to meet Mr. Farber.
Oh, is that right?
In person.
Good.
Yeah.
That's
in
good.
New York. We flew to New York and met him in person. And he passed away, I think, 2 years ago. Yeah.
Well, so the book, by the way, my wife loves it. I just got my copy, so I'm about to read it. Now I've got to read it. But I saw in one of your speeches that a lot of the proceeds go to veterans. Am I right?
All of it.
All of your proceeds?
Yeah.
So all the proceeds go to veterans?
Veterans and a few orphanages in Vietnam. And those orphanages are disabled kids.
Okay.
And a lot of those disabled kids came from Agent Orange, the effective Agent Orange.
And that brings up a point, and I meant to ask this earlier, and I'm going to ask it now, because Agent Orange is what finally got my father. But Agent Orange also impacted you, am I right in saying that? You were in and around the areas where it was.
Yes. So in 6 years ago, I found out I had a brain tumor.
Ah, really?
Yeah, and my sister also, so after it was removed, it was benign.
Okay.
But it was too big down here that it had to be removed. And then all my siblings went and got tested, and one of my sisters got it also, a brain tumor. And after talking to lots and lots of veterans, because of my book, a lot of them had brain tumor. And I asked the doctor, I said, could this be an Agent Orange, the effect of Agent Orange? And he said, he said he wasn't sure. But there's Agent Orange. Oh, my goodness.
You know, what's interesting is the VA will do what they call supposition. Or they will look at something and they'll say that in the event that you were there and you have these symptoms, they will automatically assume that it's because you were there. But they only do that with veterans. And you're not a veteran per se. You're definitely a veteran of the war, but you're not a veteran in uniform.
Right.
And so if this was a veteran who said, I was there, Agent Orange was there, I have a tumor, the VA would say, we're going to attribute that to Agent Orange.
Yeah.
You, on the other hand, don't have that luxury, but you were there at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of it flowed through the Mekong, I'm sure.
Oh, gosh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Didn't Agent Orange just recognized by the government as the effect?
Oh, it is.
It hadn't been, but it was a long time the government fought.
They put it off for quite a while.
Yeah.
And it took veterans having to fight for it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But I think even today, there's still part of Vietnam where it's still in the soil and the water that pregnant women would have children with no limbs and some disability.
I like to say that the government gets great ideas that are great ideas at the time, and they find out later they're not great ideas.
Yeah.
And that's not an indictment of government overall. I'm just saying that in my generation, one of the issues that I faced in Afghanistan was a malaria medicine that the government quickly took off the shelf when they saw all the side effects. But we had to take it for a year when I was there, and I had a lot of side effects. And then I think we're going to see generations from now, the COVID vaccine is going to wind up having been a great idea that has side effects that people didn't see coming until later.
We've seen it now.
But you got your book. It benefits veterans, and it's an amazing book. If people want to get a copy, where can they find it?
They can get it through Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is where I got mine.
Yeah.
And you're going to sign it before you leave
Oh,
it out.
absolutely.
I got one more question for you before we finish up.
Sure.
Let's say many years from now, your grandkids have a chance to watch this video. What would you want their takeaway to be?
Well, that war is evil. If we can avoid war, that would be good. That they have opportunities here in America that their cousin in Vietnam don't have, and that they should take advantage of every single opportunities that's given here in America, and also try to preserve liberty and freedom that they're so enjoy, and that they understand the hardship that their grandparents and parents had to go through for them, and really be grateful. You know, be humble and grateful for opportunity to live in the greatest country on earth. Actually, it's the greatest country in the history of the world. But mostly, I want my grandkids to know Jesus Christ. Ultimately, He is my Savior.
Well, Thanh Boyer, thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, hope you guys enjoyed that one. Listen, check out our YouTube channel. Find us at Right Side Media. We're also on all of our social media platforms, and you can also find us at rightsidemedia.org. All of our content, just click subscribe, follow, or like, and we'll see you next time on Just Right.